dropping than Monday's collapse in a key segment of U.S. oil trading. The price of the futures contract for West Texas crude that is due to expire Tuesday fell into negative territory, negative $37.63 per barrel. Sellers were actually paying buyers to take the stuff off their hands. The reason, with the pandemic bringing the economy to a standstill, there is so much unused oil sloshing around that American energy companies have run out of room to store it. And if there's no place to put the oil, no one wants a crude contract that is about to come due. Underscoring just how acute the concern over the lack of storage is, the price on the futures contract due a month later settled at $20.43 per barrel. That gap between the two contracts is by far the biggest ever. Just to let you know that the current Brent crude oil price is $23 per barrel, and this is way below Nigeria's revised budget benchmark of $30 per barrel. The Federal Inland Revenue Service, the FIRS, has announced the following additional measures to further manage the impact of the coronavirus disease on taxpayers. Waiver of late returns penalty for taxpayers who pay their tax liabilities early but submit their tax returns later. Evidence of tax payments can be forwarded to the relevant FIRS email address or submitted later to the appropriate tax office. Extension of timeline for remittance of VAT, value-added tax, from the 21st day to the last day of the month following the month of deduction. Taxpayers facing challenges in sourcing foreign exchange to settle tax liabilities on their forex-denominated transactions are permitted to pay the naira equivalent based on the prevailing investors and exporters forex window rates on the day of payment. Extension of the personal income tax returns filing deadline for personnel of the Foreign Affairs, military and police and non-resident persons by 3 months from 31st March 2020 to 30th June 2020. Indefinite suspension of all field tax audits, investigation and monitoring visits. Now to our economics discourse today on Economy and Politics show. We have to lead this discourse Mr. George Ashiru, CEO Honeycomb Consulting, who will be discussing COVID-19, economic impacts on the nation, strategic implications for businesses and the future of work. Nice to have you, Mr. George Ashiru.
It's my pleasure. Good morning. How are you?
Very great. And with me to continue this conversation is our co-guest anchor, Mr. Bosun Mofaye, CEO of Frontier Africa Reports. Good morning, Mr. Bosun.
Good morning, thank you. And good morning, Mr. Ashiru.
Good morning, sir.
It's good to have you, sir.
Yes, good morning. So day eight of the lockdown phase 2. How's the experience going, Mr. George?
It is not a pleasant experience for Nigerians as a whole, and certainly being a Nigerian, I wouldn't say that I am feeling any differently from every other Nigerian. We are an extroverted people. We're used to being out there, sourcing for means of livelihood. We are looking for ways and means in order to achieve success in our businesses. So being forced, especially in Lagos, to stay indoors affects the way you think, affects the way you plan, and affects the way you activate your business strategy, which we started over at the beginning of the year. Nonetheless, this is what we call an act of God. It's one of those things that no matter what happens, you cannot hold government responsible, you cannot hold anybody responsible, you just have to find a way to re-strategize. So remote work has become the order of the day, and we've adjusted well. Those of us in the service industry and then the tech industries, we're already used to this sort of methodology. But our clients have to also get used to it so that there's balance. So that's where we are.
Okay. Services industry, tech industry, really on top of their game. But let's look at the developments like we've read in the highlights today. The biggest 300% crash for the U.S. oil price. That's the Western Texas price, WTI. And also we've seen that the Brent crude has gone to $23 per barrel, below our revised budget benchmark of $30. Putting all this together into context, what are the implications so far on the economy, alongside other challenges that COVID-19 pandemic has brought?
It simply means that the government is going to end up being going to go borrowing again. Because once your budgeted income, which is already a deficit budget, is now impacted even more negatively by a factor of well over 50%. So where you're looking at 7 point something trillion in expenditure, which will probably now go up because of the bailouts. And then you are now looking at income, which is supposed to be half of that. You're already going to deficit budget about $5 billion in terms of borrowing. Now, we're already having debts worth $83 billion worldwide, including Nigeria, obviously, domestic and external. And external is about 42. So we're in the red ocean. We're in the red ocean. So what is required right now is the national economic team to look inwards and look for a solution that is going to help us go through this season. And this season is going to be at least 18 months.
18 months?
At least.
Okay, I'll get to you, Mr. George. Mr. Bolson, I saw your tweets yesterday when you highlighted that huge 300% crash in the oil price globally in US. And our Brent is $23 per barrel at this point, below the budget benchmark. Yeah. What comes to your mind? What are the key issues you're looking at in terms of the implications for the economy at this point?
I think is we're all analysts by now. We don't need to, I'm not sure you need to have a degree in economics or econometrics to understand where we are. And I think basically everyone understands where we were. It's just that we couldn't face up the reality, undress in public, tell ourselves the home truth, and take all our past misgovernance and what have you, put it behind us and face the future with renewed dedication, integrity, and focus, and devoid of nepotism, tribalism, sectionalism, and 6 geopolitical zones, whatever. So that being said, we are at the bottom of the barrel, as it were. How we will climb out of the hole is a different conversation. And I think one of the fastest and the easiest way for us right now is to take the knife, and a very hot knife, and take it through our public and civil service and political system. That is the first thing we must do, like yesterday. And yesterday, one of the newspapers reported that the Oyo State House of Assembly is cutting they're doing a 30% haircut. I think right now, across the 36 states, we should be doing 50 to 60%. We can do away with a lot of luxury cars. We can do away with a lot of luxury and grand estate that we call governor's lodge and governor's houses. Some states have 2 cities or 2 towns within the same state for which the governor stays. He stays in one, the political capital, and he has another governor's lodge in the economic capital of the state. Some states that I'm aware of in the southwest and down south. And some of the governor's lodges are like a ranch of his own with horses. Some of them have a helicopter landing pad. I know a particular state government that has about 3 landing pads for helicopters. And within this particular, what we call governor's lodge, there are streets. You could get lost. You need a whole map to navigate it. It's such a huge place. And this is a state with a population of just about 2 million or thereabout. And the monthly FAC allocation runs into double-digit billions of naira. The whole civil service is about 200,000, whatever. Even if everybody is a civil servant in this particular state in the South, how much do they get? So where's all this money going? So this is the time now to do drastic cuts to House of Assemblies and the executive branch as well. Donating 2 months' salary in March and April won't do it. And I said this about 2-3 weeks ago, that thank you guys, but sorry, I'm giving you my thank you with a cautionary note. It has to do more than what the legislators are offering at the National Assembly in March and April. They need to do drastic tea, coffee, pastries, going to Israel, going for pilgrimages, whatever, had to be cut down to, in fact, this is the time to scrap some what you call commissions, through which exchange rate. Some guys have seen a nice time twice a year to do the Hajj commission and do the one for those going to Israel, whatever, Christian and Muslim. We need to scrap some commissions straight out. The central bank, we don't have the money. We cannot subsidize anybody going for any religious pilgrimage from the year 2020. Can we just put that forward and just yank it out of our pages and throw it in the dustbin? And say, sorry, we're not doing that anymore. We need to save money and be honest with ourselves that we can't afford certain things any longer. If you have a local government chairman or a state governor going about in about 5, 2, 6, 7, 8 convoys, I don't have any problem. But if you look at the military guys, one single vehicle in the middle, and maybe one in the front and one at the back loaded with soldiers is just enough for a naval officer or whatever. And the military seem to have a little bit of sense of being a little bit frugal. Yes, with resources. But the civilian Democrats, the PA, special assistant, whatever, and everybody has a retinue of staff and aid and whatever. This is the time to cut it all off and let everybody go to the office, carry his or her files, okay, in his hands. You don't need someone to open the door for you. I don't want to pick up your tea bag, your lunch bar box. Someone else is picking up your phones, and you are in one agbada going like this. Hold on a second. Can we just cut off all these excess fats, as it were, and go to the gym? Now we are all there. The oil price collapse has taught us, it's not just oil prices collapsed, the entire industry is collapsed. Demand has collapsed, supply has collapsed, price has collapsed. So the whole world of oil has totally collapsed. I'm just re-echoing what people have said over time, that this is the time to do these measures. Would we have the political will to do it before the 2023 elections? There's no better time to have this consensus now to get us, everyone on page. Once this virus is over in the next few months, hopefully, and I'm praying, and it gets back to business, everybody gets back on the 2023 general elections, and everybody's trying to see what they can get to continue business as usual on the governance and the political front. We need to use this time to do the surgery, the quiet surgical years that the country needs, and I hope and I wish President Buhari will take this on board and do it for the country once and for all, because this is his second and the final term in office. If he's doing this, it will do Nigeria a lot of good, if you can push it from the top.
Take it head on.
Yeah.
Mr. George, what are your reactions to this thought from Mr. Bolson?
My reactions are similar. I mean, I've always advocated for a reform of the public service, because if you don't reform the public service, the greater expenditure that the federal government earns actually goes to the public service. The private sector generates 70% of our GDP, but the external income that the government relies on is what runs the public service. So when you look at the fact that we don't even have a fantastic social welfare system, so exactly what does government spend their money on when it comes to the private sector? You take taxes from the private sector. Private sector generates the largest share of the GDP, but the external income that comes in belongs to the federal government and the state governments. So by the time they share it within the three tiers of government and the houses of parliament, then what you have left is not enough for sensible progress. So a time for, I don't know, I don't want to be political, but it's a time to go back to a very famous public service reform documentation that was made popular. It will reduce costs. It will reduce, as a matter of fact, whether you like it or not, you can't actually travel this year. The vast majority of countries are going to prevent people from coming to their countries for the rest of 2020. So whether we like it or not, the demand for forex is will naturally go down, apart from buying goods which are necessary. So what we need to do now is to move a little bit away from reliance on oil, which has been said over and over again for decades, and start going back again to how we can export our goods and services. And by the way, all the Nigerians in diaspora, those are exports. As I'm sure you know that the remittances that are coming in every year is well over $30 billion. So if we can continue to export services and continue to export skills and continue to export those things that the world needs at the moment, right now, technology, medicines, pharmaceuticals, the healthcare industry, and we have nurses, we have doctors that the world needs right now, that may help us. That's what Cuba is trying to also do. So I think there's a necessity at the level of the federal and the state government to begin to now use the automations which they talked about. There is a national strategy for e-governance. Much of it has not been activated yet. There's still a lot of argument on using the salary platforms between ASU and the federal government. These are things that by now they should have taken as a necessity, because the future of work has changed the way we do business. And I think that's what this opportunity provides for us. I think we will survive it. I think we will survive it. What is important is to contain the spread of COVID in Africa. Once this spread is contained, then we have to bring our business methodology to become Africa-centric. And that will help Nigeria in the long run.
Fantastic.
Yes, yes.
Africa-centric, and I think it's just good. This is the time. As the central bank governor puts it in one of the paragraphs in the latest policy document that was released about a week ago, said this may be the end of globalization for a generation that we've seen it. So everybody will now have to build his own supply chain. You need to be very careful who you lean on. We leaned so long on the United States for our crude oil purchase. Then a few years ago, we got a crude shock or crude awakening from the United States. Then we scrambled to the Indians and the Chinese and the others. So we kept scrambling from one end to the other. We can't keep having these as a state policy, economic policy. It's wrong. So we need to say, look, if we need to fix quite a lot of things. How much are we putting out? How much are we saving from the crude oil? And how much are we refining locally? The entire domestic refining of petrol products is a conversation that's been for about 4 decades.
Petroleum Ministry reforms and even the bills.
We've had all these reforms and bills. The PIB is still there with the National Assembly. Would they use this opportunity to quickly ram it through, have a consensus, bipartisan, and let us have something that is workable? And then we can begin to leverage the rest of what is in the oil industry to build some form of industrialization within the oil base and local content, whatever it is that we can take from this wrecked oil train, as it were. That is on one side. Then the Pan-African focus is that whether we like it or not, 1st of July, the conversation is already there about how much impact will the coronavirus have on the new EFCFTA agreement, and the 20-something, about 25 countries that have already signed on, they will take off. Those who are serious are going to take off. And I can tell you for free, I can count for you as I'm sitting here, about 5 to 10 African countries that despite this coronavirus, they are busy working on how to get the EFCFTA up and running. Kenya is one of them. Uganda is one of them. Even as bad as things as Zimbabwe is one of them. And you just need to go through their official webpage for EFCFTA and Ghana. The conversation is already on, and they are planning and they are working. So we need to what we need to put in place is not just to think about this, but the way beyond this. So Pan-African, being Afrocentric, is the way to go within the West African region. During the military days, we made so much impact that Nigeria was the big brother and the big boy. We paying the bills, and the Nigerian soldiers' lives were also shared in Sierra Leone, in Ivory Coast, in Liberia, all the way down. So we didn't build any economic values or gains into those adventures that we did. Now is the time to see whatever is left to build a very strong West African economic region on the back of our demography, our youth, our resilience, our entrepreneurial spirit, and the gateway of trade by land, mainly that we've built over time. If you go to Sierra Leone, Senegal, Ghana, there's no single country in West Africa, even the core French-speaking countries, that you don't have Nigerians having shops here, are doing businesses there. Dangote is doing some cement there. We have our banks down there. How do we put all of this together into a cohesive West African economic policy document and action that will help us push beyond what we have right now? If anybody is working on it and they're watching this show, thank you very much. If we haven't started, this is the time to start. The West African market alone is huge. If you go through Maiduguri, for example, the massive trade that goes on by land between Maiduguri in Borno State to the far northeast to Chad, Niger, Cameroon, all the way to Congo DRC. And I was in Maiduguri a couple of years ago. It's a pipeline. In fact, Maiduguri is what Lagos is to the ECOWAS Southwest. So for Central and North Africa, Maiduguri is there. The earlier we also find solution to the problems there and use that as another gateway to have a foothold economically and trade-wise with these other Central North African countries, the better for us, since we have the West Africa. So we are so blessed by being well-positioned, but we haven't been able to take a very good advantage yes, and this is the time to do it. Yeah. Otto.
Very interesting. So, Mr. George Ashure, a very interesting development now from COVID-19 pandemic. We're seeing billionaires billionaires really now saying that they can't go on if they don't get government intervention. I mean, CEO of Virgin Atlantic, Mr. Richard Branson, Sir Richard Branson, multi-billionaire, has said he doesn't get
his island estate
as collateral.
As a collateral, yeah.
We're seeing the CEO of Marriott, serious business leaders saying that they will not be able to go forward if they don't have those interventions required from government. What are the strategic implications of this pandemic for businesses? And looking at interventions at this time, we're seeing what was happening across the world. What would you expect to see happen in Nigeria for some industries like aviation? Aviation is badly hit. I mean, South Africa Airways are going to lay off 5,000 workers, give them the severance packages. That is huge. That's massive.
Okay, of course, what is very clear to us is that when there's a pandemic like this, where countries are shutting their borders, certain kinds of industries are immediately affected. Then when you look internally, the movement of goods and services is also restricted because of fear of the further spread of this disease. So until medicine finds a cure or finds a vaccine for the foreseeable future, the way we do business will change. The way people are doing business will change. Logistics will become very popular right now. What I think businesses ought to do right now is not to focus on the negatives, is to focus on the opportunities. So what does this speak about me? For example, we have supermarkets now who realize that people can't come into their stores, and they are now investing, even outside of the logistics companies, they are building logistics capacity by themselves. Now they're looking for people who can ride and drive, and there's psychometric testing now that is bringing technology into it. They're doing remote, there's a lot of remote work going on. And we've already been told that artificial intelligence is going to take over the world in the future. We've already been told that a time will come when 50% of the workforce as we know it, their work can be done. It doesn't mean it will be done, it can be done with technology. So what I think should happen is that first and foremost, there will be interventions. So government has to intervene in the short term because the government cannot, Nigerian government is not in a position to intervene beyond the short term. We don't have a fantastic foreign reserve. We are not going to earn any sensible money this year. And where else are we going to get the money to finance billionaires whose businesses have gone bust? So the bottom line is that we're not in the position is the United States, United Kingdom, who have fantastic foreign reserves. China's foreign reserves are massive. Their debts are very low, if there's any at all. We're not in that position. We have to look, again, I'm going to use that word for Afrocentric solutions. Now, we set up African Export and Import Bank, AFEXIM. The purpose of that bank was to create intra-Africa trade, was to create balance of trade opportunities where you can say, okay, you know what, we would deliver these goods worth 5 billion and you can give us something worth 5 billion. We don't even have to exchange cash. There's a lot of opportunity for African countries to look for a solution that allows us to do business and trade and keep this balance going and reduce our expectations on goods from China, which takes a lot of our forex, and services from, expatriates are also taking a lot of our forex. So foreign education, what's happening? Can people stay in this country and learn online? So what I think businesses ought to be doing right now is to do a business continuity plan. Sit down and say, how am I going to survive over the next 3 months and 9 months? And what government should do is right now, at the moment, my suggestion is you have already provided 50 billion loan through your NERSA. Fantastic. That is being accessed by who? What is the modality to make sure that it trickles down to the people that are generating 70 billion of the public sector GDP, private sector GDP? So what I'm suggesting is that the bank should have a certain leeway to provide loans with a lower expectations in terms of the facilities. For example, as an SME, perhaps I only need 10 million to survive over the next 3 months. I have 10 people working for me. If my bank would give me an overdraft automatically for 10 million, it's not a gift, it's not a bailout, it's a loan. That 10 million is guaranteed by the federal government. It means that I can continue to buy and sell. It means the economy will continue to remain. But if I don't have money to spend, I will tell my staff to go. Now, when my staff go away, they have less money or no money to spend anywhere, so the economy remains in a glut. So what the purpose of governments giving bailouts, Americans are giving out trillions of dollars in bailout, is to ensure that there is trade going on, buying and selling, so that there is constant, recycling of money, recycling of opportunities, and that will reduce unemployment. So that's what we need to do. Now, bailing out 1 or 2 billionaires may not be the best way for us. Bailing out a larger number of the MSMEs are better for us as an economy. So if you bail out Dangote, you have to take the entire income of the federal government to bail out just one company. I'm not saying Dangote is looking for bailout, it's just an example. So but in the case of the UK, the amount of money that Richard Branson is looking for $500 million is a very tiny amount of money compared to the GDP of that country. So they can bail him out. And that can make sure that industry survives. But we don't have the capacity to build out billion and other businesses in Nigeria. But what we should do is to ensure that we bail out all the small businesses. Businesses that are turning over less than 25 million. The tax rates have been dropped to zero for 25 million and below. Then you need to also support them. Because, like I said before, they constitute 70% of the gross national product of this nation. That's what I'm thinking would work right now.
Okay. And I agree totally with you, Mr. Ashiru. Just a second here. The problem here is this. The U.S. and other developed economies can bail out the private sector, bail out billionaires, bail out small businesses and whatever in the manner in which they've done, and they are doing under the current circumstances, because those economies were built primarily on the back of the private sector. We are a civil service, public service-based economy, and Mr. Ashiru rightly placed the numbers and thoughts earlier in his comment. So how we're going to restructure the Nigerian economy that will now be driven by the private sector is how to get out of the sword that get away from under the sword of the Damocles without getting hurt. I think that's the biggest problem here. If you look at the banking sector bailout that we've done at least about twice, hundreds of billions, trillions of naira of taxpayers' money went down. Then the banks had to contribute some little amount every year into a sinking fund, whatever, with the central bank. They started complaining because the economy does not suit the private sector. Most of the things we complain about, everything we complain about in the private sector and the big businessmen and business-focused individuals and organizations like Mr. Ashiru is because the private sector is not part of the budget we do every year is for the civil service, We don't have a private sector-led economy. It's not just about asking private bossing to join Lagos State government in building road. That's not the basic. The economy must be built from the fiscal point of view as a private sector-led, not civil service. When with the structure we've had from the military days is what we're still executing. The Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria does not encourage private sector or public sector enterprise. It's all skewed in favor of the civil service and the public service. Until we change this fundamental, to allow the private sector to take the front seat of the economic airplane, we will not get things done. What the governments in developed economies do or countries do is just manage the resources on behalf of the businesses and the people, not first and foremost taking care of the National Assembly of buying new cars. The private sector, if Richard Branson complains and GM Motors complain or Bank of they complain, the government knows that these are big revenue contributors. They are the drivers of the economy. So when the American president is talking about the American economy, he is not talking about the White House economy. He's not talking about the FBI. He's not talking about the customs. He's talking about the GM Motors, Ford, Google, the Facebook. Those are the ones he's talking about. Each time we talk a little bit more. The only time we get to see the private sector was when we see the central bank governor, Aliko, the MD of Access Bank, talking about distribution, the CACOVID, and talking about food distribution. We don't have people. We have economic advisors to the president and whatever. These folks hardly speak to the private sector. I'm sorry, with due respect to each and every one of them. We need to begin to make plans. So this Economic Stabilization Committee, with which the vice president, sustainable and everything we've had before,
yes.
I think we can now use this opportunity to turn the table round and allow the private sector to lead. And it has to be a deliberate restructuring that comes from the heart, rather than trying to put the Governors Forum as the head of economic management of the country. It's not done that way. Thank you. It's not the governors forum that should be talking about the economy of this country. It is the private sector that should lead. So the government, and that means that the private, why do you see the private sector in Nigeria hardly support universities, research institutes? Because they can't see the end game. Who wants to just put his money there? So the private sector will be willing to support public universities to have research. They will support research institutes. But because all these are all tied to the apron of the federal government, everybody wants to be the DG of one agency or the other. And you have a commission or the other because it's a juicy way of getting things done. We should let the private sector lead. You cannot get cheap money from any bank. Interest rates will not be at the right point. SMEs will not be able to get things done. As long as we allow the federal, state, and local government, civil service, and public service be the godfather, dictating the pace of how things go, is the private sector. Small Businesses Association, or what's called the SBA in the US, the largest employer of labor. They are you can, if you mess with them, you are in trouble. In fact, with this current arrangement with the US authority, they are the first in line. Yeah. So I agree with Mr. Ashiru. It's not the Ford and the Richard Branson in the UK that's getting first. It's the small businesses first, because these are the guys who are employing the common man. And they have the numbers. Yeah. So you go to those ones first. But you don't have even the numbers. We have adequate data of all the small businesses in Nigeria to start with. What structure do we have for them in terms of the various industrial clusters that we've had over the decades and the new ones that are emerging? For example, how many traders or artisans do we have in area market and above, for example? Can somebody give me the numbers? I'm not sure we know. The Kano Industrial Estate, how many do we have there? Do we have the accurate numbers of data? Of the trade? I'm not sure we have. Those who can give you some numbers are maybe the LCCI and Kano Chamber of Commerce. Port Harcourt Chamber of Commerce, other chambers. If you don't fall into that, well, that sounds a little bit elitist. You need
also that.
Please go ahead, sir.
We should look at the fact that the size of the economy in that cluster of the Alaba Traders Association, according to international organizations that do some research, is about $20 billion. So think about that. Now, their business is going to be directly impacted because obviously they are mainly export goods and goods especially. We're looking at the computer village, the size of that business. So these are people that if they pay their taxes, it's making a big difference. The amount of people they're employing is making a big difference. So we can tell them to change their direction and be more inward looking, but we need to support that too. So when we take this cluster, the businesses in Aba, the businesses in Alaba, the businesses in the computer village and other such basic centers, the cocoa industry, the forgotten granite pyramids that right now, is going to be necessary, the rice plantations that have been built all over the country, these are all internally generated opportunities that we can now invest some of the monies on. As a matter of fact, in order to ensure people are working, government can actually put aside a large amount of money for farming. COVID does not stop the farms from bringing out their produce, as long as there's no farming. So we have to start thinking, and like Mr. Boxon says, think about the fact that NESG is a private sector-led organization. By now, such organizations and the chambers of commerce and industries should have a position paper. They don't need to wait for government policies. They have to have an input directly by saying, this is our thought, NECA. This is our way of thinking that if you do this, you will get that. Scenario 1, Scenario 2, Scenario 3. But everybody's waiting for CBN to give a guideline. We're waiting for the Office of Sustainability to provide us a guideline. Now, these are just 4, 5, 6 people in the committee that are going to think for 200 million people. So like Mr. Boso says, there is a necessity for us to be proactive in bringing solutions rather than wait for government to bring solutions for itself, which is going to impact all of us.
If I may add a little bit of a petrol to the fire, Mr. Ashiru, is that if you look at the U.S., for example, you find the opposition political parties coming, mainly the Democrat, for example, coming up with some solutions, their own version of what whatever should look like. And I'm surprised here that we have the APC as the ruling party, but I haven't seen any serious position paper from any of the other opposition parties. I'm sorry. The whole conversation has to be deep. I haven't seen any position paper. There was a write-up by Atiku Abubakar of the PDP about 2-3 weeks ago. Since then, within the National Assembly, I mean between the upper and the lower legislative house, at the National Assembly, and maybe at some state level, to have position paper on how certain things could be done under the current circumstances and the way forward. But it looks like everybody's quiet. I'm particularly as a journalist unhappy with such a development that when you're strong, you are politically very vocal when it comes to elections and what have you, but when it comes to times of this social economic meltdown and with recession staring us right in the face, is how deep the recession will be. It's not a matter of if we will go into recession, it is how badly we'll be hurt. And I'm not hearing anything different from the political, I'm not talking about political noise making, but in terms of hard facts, constructive policy engagement. Do we have economic think tank within these opposition political parties? I'm not too sure if we have. Unless they want to tell me, as a journalist, that all they wait for is the cloud to clear up, then they will go into the political sandbox and everybody start making campaigns for 2023. What exactly do you have? Because whoever wins and whatever political parties coming in 2023, there's going to be one crisis or another 2023 onward. Now, we're not having anything on the board. We're not having constructive engagement.
Which is very important.
Which is very important from those who will come in 2022, 2023, asking for folks to vote for them. So beyond the private sector, LCCR, NESG, NASIMA, ASIMA, the rest of them, Lagos Business School and all of that, and they're doing fantastic. But some of them are doing well. But again, the folks that step forward and ask for votes, that are asking folks to elect them, or who goes into these offices, should come out now and let us have something sound and tangible from them to add to the discussion about where we're going forward. I think that is important.
Very important, I understand.
I think I just wanted to add that, if that's not sounding a bit more political.
Yes.
On the
nexus between politics and economy is always very
exactly,
very
yes.
So, Mr. Ashiru, let's look at the future of work and the skills that you believe at this time will be very important. The future of work shaped by the COVID-19 pandemic and the skills that will really needed in this time to be competitive.
Thank you very much. I'm involved as an executive of the Global Performance Index, a technology company that aggregates data for such instances. And we foresee that the automated workforce of the future, we were looking at 2030, as we fast forwarded to 2020. Because whether you like it or not, we have forever changed in our patterns and our attitudes towards the way we want to do work. Now, the large number of deaths in a short period of time in advanced economies like United States, which has the largest pandemic experience right now, Italy, United Kingdom, these were places we went to for education. These are places we went to for healthcare. Now, they are suffering even more than Africa is experiencing at the moment. That tells us one thing. They will be forced to make drastic changes to the way they do work because of their experience, and that will impact on the rest of the world. So you will now find that the majority of the big multinationals and large companies all over the world are going to shift their work patterns to more remote working. So people who don't have such skills are going to find it difficult to get jobs going forward. So if you're not trained in the automated, I don't need to mention names of tools, but the tools that are required for each industry, you're going to find it difficult. Now look at our academic situation in Nigeria. Look at the level of training in technology in our universities and polytechnics. I don't think we're at par at the moment. So in Africa, maybe it may not occur immediately this year, but it also means that our productivity will be low, because if you don't jump into the bandwagon of automation as quickly as possible because of the situation we find ourselves in, you are going to still need to rely on human beings to do work. You are going to put their health at risk, and your productivity also will be at jeopardy. So the work of the future has come forward by 10 years. So whether we like it or not, now we're looking at the fact that artificial intelligence is now doing telemedicine. So doctors now, people go to to ADA, that's the name of a software that allows you to put in your various experiences, your symptoms, and it will give you 2 or 3 scenarios. There is a thing called Watson by IBM. It can practically detect cancer faster than tests by doctors. People are going to start going to that bandwagon. So even the health centers and healthcare providers have to go into technology. And we know that healthcare will never, ever be affected by whatever is going on in this world. People need to survive. But we also know that in order for them to be efficient, they need to be able to reach out to a larger number of people. Technology will be necessary. Look at education, whether we like it or not now. Everybody's going to virtual learning environments. So look at banking. Banking has already gone via USSD and online platforms to people not even going to banks. Some of us don't even go to banks at all for months at the end. So the future of work has come ahead. And in the very first place, governance, e-governance, is now required and requested in this country. There's a necessity right now for almost every platform of government to be put as much as possible on an automated platform. And that will trickle down to the way we also relate with government. So we have put together something that allows people to report safely from their homes, domestic violence. And it is like going to the police station to make a report. These are the kinds of things that would occur as we go forward. So I think that not just government, private sector, the investment you did not want to make in automation has become necessary right now.
All right, Mr. Ashiru, let me get your closing thoughts. I know we had a lot to look at here, but let's get your closing thoughts. We've discussed extensively around the economy, businesses, and the future of work. We talked about automation. What are your closing thoughts on this discourse today?
Well, I think what we need to keep remembering is that this conversation has to continue going, and that's that COVID-19 has exposed that the world to a sample of what a world war would look like. If our generation has forgotten how it was in the First World War and the Second World War, now we know what it would look like, where there will be borders shut, movement of goods and services will be brought to zero, where oil price can be in a negative territory. These are things that even the great economists would never have thought in advance would happen. And this is from a disease that only kills an average of 2% of the people that are infected. It's not even as deadly as Ebola that kills 50%. This one kills, according to statistics, an average of 2 to 3, in some instances 5 to 6%, but that's because testing is not done on time. And what if it was a disease that kills on sight? What if it was a disease that kills instantly? So our healthcare systems now have to be upgraded. The capacity and the capability to deal with infectious diseases has to be upgraded exponentially in Nigeria and every other part of the world, especially in Africa, because we've had so many of them. Lassa fever is still raining. Malaria is still killing people. 500,000 plus people died of malaria last year, even though we have all kinds of niverquins and whatever they are called. So I think right now is an opportunity for self-reflection. Governments and leaders have to reflect on economic practices, how to reflect on governance. My brother mentioned about the National Assembly. National Assembly has to go beyond thinking about themselves, about thinking about providing policies and providing bills and legislation that affects and influences and encourages this country to grow. And by the way, the size of Nigeria is impacting the whole of West Africa. Whatever happens in Nigeria is going to cascade to West Africa. The influence we have, the economic capacity that we can engender, and the kind of political power that we can also progress. We can project to East Africa, we can project to South Africa, even to the North Africans. This is the time for us to use this opportunity to make ourselves leaders in marketplaces. And I think, or maybe I should say I hope, that somebody somewhere is thinking about this in the corridors of power.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. George Ashiru. Mr. Bolson, any?
I think my parting shot goes precisely with Mr. Ashiru about the future of work. Why we need technology, we need new skills, we need to incorporate machine learning, artificial intelligence, technology, e-governance. I hope all is carefully outlined thoughts and ideas. Some folks are listening within the government at federal and subnational level, and they're incorporating this into what I understand is going to be released pretty soon. I understand that the Office of the Vice President has sat down with the various stakeholders within the government and private sector, and they're working on a very robust economic policy document, which I hope that thoughts like on education and technology, you can virtual learning and what have you, all of this will come together within that, rather than just coming out with a document that will address just the COVID-19 measures and give us, just rehash the old speeches that had been discussed or talked about how creating 100 million jobs over 10 years and all of that, and make it something workable and hand it over, technically speaking, to the private sector to lead with, rather than the government trying to lead such a new policy direction that we want to. I hope it will be well designed with the private sector in mind and allowed and be given to the private sector to lead and support the private sector wholeheartedly to lead this economic renaissance that this COVID-19 has given us an opportunity to rescript for ourselves as a country.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bosa Mofaye. We still have you here for 10 o'clock. Thank you very much, Mr. George Ashiru, for the conversation.
My pleasure. Thank you
and your
very much.
incisive input. And that's all today for the economic and politics discourse. We looked at COVID-19, economic impacts on Nigeria and across the globe, and the strategic implications for businesses alongside the future of work. Mr. George Ashiru is the CEO of Honeycup Consulting. We'll continue this conversation by 10 a.m. as we look at the market review. We have a very nice, interesting topic and guest. Stay tuned.